This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so welcome to Elite Mastermind, guys. It's lovely to see everybody here, as always. Really nice turnout tonight. So the last few weeks we've been looking over anatomy, and last week we were kind of relating that to exercises themselves. So we've gone over the kind of foundations of anatomy, and we've kind of figured out how that relates to the movements that you're actually doing within your programs. So hopefully that was useful, and hopefully that stands you in reasonably good stead for the next part. However, if you haven't been to the recent tutorials or seminars, please don't worry, don't stress at all. It is all, you'll be able to get some good takeaways regardless of kind of what point you actually start at. So don't worry if you haven't been to the last few weeks. Over the next few weeks, we'll be looking at programming. So this is one where there's a lot of kind of terminology as always, but what I want you to really focus on is the basic concepts that we're trying to teach you. So it's not so much I want you to worry about the terms volume, intensity, progressive overload, all these types of things. If you can kind of understand the reasons why we do what we do in the programs, and you can understand the basic concept of programming, this stands you in really, really good stead when it comes to figuring out how to set up your own sessions. And at some point, you may wish to set up your own sessions.
2 seconds, I'm going to bring it over.
Say again, sorry?
I'm just doing it. Just give me 1 second.
No worries.
Perfect.
Cool. So yeah, the reason that we go over programming, guys, it may be something that you wish to do for yourself at some point in future. So you may wish to write your own program, or you might just wish to know why we're giving you the stuff that we're giving you. But either way, it's going to give you all of the tools that you need to make smart decisions within the gym. Sometimes you might find like a machine is taken. Sometimes you might find that you're not able to carry out your regular program because you're away. But if you do understand the basic concepts, it gives you a really good idea, and it gives you a little bit more control over what you're doing. So I think it's a really useful thing to understand. So before we get into it, does anybody have any questions at all before I share my screen?
I think I'm just interested because, as you know, I had a basher trainer plan a training session of my own the other week with being at the new gym. So I find it easy, even though I've been on it a couple of times. I just keep learning every time I listen to them. So
brilliant. Good, that's what we want. Yeah, absolutely. Remember, guys, these will come round again, so don't worry if it feels a little bit overwhelming today. We just want you to try and get at least one takeaway. So see if you can get one takeaway, so something that you didn't know prior to the session that you will know at the end of the session. So make wee notes as you go through. All right, good stuff.
Sorry, Tristan. Tristan, sorry, I'm going to have to disappear for a few minutes. We had a distress call from the in-laws down the road. I'm hoping to be back in a few minutes, so I'm going to leave my camera on, but there won't be anybody sat here.
No worries. Sorry to hear that, Anne. I hope everything's okay. But yep, do what you need to do. No problem at all.
Thank you.
All right. All right, guys, I will share my screen now.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, God.
Everything okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, guys, so we're just going to start off. We're going to piece it together kind of bit by bit. Can everybody see that okay, by the way? Yep, great. So we're going to piece it together bit by bit. So we're going to start off looking at how to structure a kind of individual session, and we're going to relate that to the week of training. So that's this week. So we're looking at how to structure your individual sessions and how that kind of works into the week. And then we'll kind of build it up bit by bit. We'll look at kind of blocks. We'll look at periodization. We'll look at how your training blocks change, you know, month to month. So this is kind of what's called like a micro cycle of training. And then we can look at mesocycles, which is maybe more like kind of months of training, and then macrocycles, where we look at almost like years worth of training. But for now, we'll look at how to structure a session. So main factors. So prioritize the goal of the session. And that's where we say for you guys. So we're talking specifically here, guys, about kind of strength and hypertrophy training. Anybody know what I mean by hypertrophy?
Making your muscles bigger.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So just muscle gain, hypertrophy. Absolutely. Great stuff. So we're talking specifically about kind of strength and hypertrophy programming, but you can relate these concepts to different types of training. It would just kind of present a little bit differently. So why?
You're right, Mum.
No, not for me.
No,
Why
I've
do
got
we-
my cup of tea here, Mum. I've got it. Let me just listen to this, Mum. Let me just listen to this for half an hour and just sit there and drink your tea because I've paid.
Noise, right? I'll get you to mute if there's some background noise, guys. All right. So, what we're chatting about. So, main kind of strength development movements first. Okay. So, why do you think we would do your kind of strength development movements? Or in fact, I'll ask first, what do you think your kind of strength development movements are? I know some of you will have been through kind of similar sessions to where we talk about kind of strength development movements, and some may not. What do we reckon we mean by that? You can unmute the chat, obviously. Yeah.
Like your big compound movements, like your deadlifts and squats and things like that. Ones where you moving multiple muscles rather than just focusing on one sort of area. So I'm trying not to answer as many of these because actually these are some of the things I'd have some pain. So I'm like, I was sort of wanting to give other people a chance with it, and I thought, I think I might get this right actually, so I want to answer for a change.
Yeah, no, really good. You're absolutely spot on there, Deborah. That's good. And always, guys, answer, even if you're not sure, have a guess. It's absolutely fine. I always think whether you get it right or wrong, and you've got that absolutely spot on there, Deborah. But yeah, whether you get it right or wrong, I think if you have a guess, it always helps to remember these things as we go through. So yeah, strength development movements. We're basically looking at, as Deborah says, kind of big, kind of heavier movements, compound movements, where the goal of the movement is moving weight from A to B. So moving kind of heavy weights efficiently from A to B. That's the kind of goal of the exercise itself. So I would call that a kind of strength development movement, because they are movements that lend themselves particularly well to sort of developing strength. So we tend to do these first. Kathy, have you got a question there?
Yeah, I mean, all my programs have got strength development movements first. I've been finding if I do not a big strength development movement first, it's almost like it warms me up a bit. So for example, if I've got squats first, I'll maybe do 10 goblet squats before I go straight into the squats. And if I've got like bench press, I might just do some sort of ups and downs or something like that. It almost seems like I'd do better if I've warmed my muscles up a bit first.
Absolutely, yeah. So what I would say there is, it's not like you're necessarily doing your kind of hypertrophy movements or anything else first. You're just doing an appropriate warm-up for what you're about to do. So goblet squats is a fantastic way to warm up for squats, and especially because it's specific to you. So I know that you are quite kind of hip dominant and struggle to get those quads firing. So doing a kind of front-loaded squat variation before your squats is probably a really good, appropriate kind of warm-up for you. But I wouldn't necessarily see that as doing like different types of movements first. This is just kind of general kind of warm-ups for your strength development movement. But absolutely, we always want to do our warm-ups prior to the session. So we're just talking about the kind of session itself, so the bit will be written down in terms of your main body of work within the session. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, but no, really good point there. That's great. Does somebody have their hand up there, or did I miss that? No worries. Okay, so why do we think we do your kind of strength development? So these big heavy movements where there's lots of muscles, lots of joints moving and working. Why do we think we do these first within a session? Or why do you think it might be a good idea? It's not the only way to do it, but why do you think it might be a good idea to do that first in the session?
Because they take longer to fatigue the muscles.
Yeah. What do you mean by that exactly there? So
the big muscles can do a lot more than your little sort of accessory muscles. So therefore, you need to weaken them down a bit first to get the others to fire.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. This would almost be like a kind of pre-fatigue type thing that you're talking about, which is it is a method that we would sometimes use in your training sessions, but it's almost the other way around here. But it is a good point, and that is definitely a kind of training method. If you want to look up kind of pre-fatigue, it's called. It is a kind of a technique for hypertrophy bodybuilders will quite often use it. And it's to kind of prevent kind of bigger muscles from taking over, so you can get the smaller muscles, or you can get other muscle groups to kind of fire and fatigue. But that wouldn't be, generally speaking, the reason why we do the big heavy movements first, but definitely a good point. Any ideas? So if I were to say, whenever you're doing your squats within your program versus your bicep curls, which requires more mental focus for you and mental energy?
Squats.
Squats.
Squats, yeah, absolutely. So this is why we kind of do them first. So it requires, they've got quite a high skill component to them, these movements, generally speaking. So we have to focus on kind of balancing the movement appropriately, moving really efficiently. There's lots and lots of muscles that come into play, as Rhonda's saying. So if some are kind of fatigued before we go in to the movement, it might mean that we're not moving as efficiently. And when we're trying to develop strength, we want to move quite efficiently. So yeah, from that point of view, we want to think about the kind of goal of the session and prioritize that goal. And this means sometimes or quite often doing the big heavy movements first while we're fresh, while we've got a bit of both mental and physical energy, because they are quite demanding on both.
So
does that kind of make sense? Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, so, obviously when I try to do that work, pull that workout together, I had myself on the hack squat machine, which I was still classing as a big compound movement, but you suggested I did the deadlift first and then move on to the hack squat. And is that because there's more to, I guess, if you're using the machine, that's taking away some of the thinking, if you like, of the positioning of everything. Whereas with the deadlift, it's like free rein, like you free, isn't it? It's like free weights, if you like. Is that one of the reasons why you suggested doing that?
Absolutely, yeah. So literally exactly that reason, yeah. So you're, as you say, kind of bringing in external stability whenever you're using machines. So whenever we're doing kind of free weights and that kind of thing, it requires us to stabilize ourselves and to focus on the balance and the positioning, and it requires a lot more skill and technique to carry out. So this is why we tend to do the higher skill movements first prior to that, because you could do deadlifts, really fatigue yourself, and then move on to hack squats. And hack squats are just a kind of, but for those who don't know, you kind of lie back on the machine. Your back is supported, and you just you'll roll up and down a roller basically, and you can add weights onto it, and you're just pushing with your legs basically. So it's a very kind of quadricep, so your thigh muscle, the muscle on the top of your leg, it's very quadricep dominant movement. So because of that, you don't have to think as much. Obviously skill is definitely still there, but you don't have to think as much during that movement. So I would tend to put it slightly later on in the program for that reason. Yeah. And also, if you want your deadlifts to go well, you probably don't want your quads to be really fatigued, because you do want to use your quads whenever you're deadlifting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Not really good point. Denny, you've got a question there.
Yeah, I haven't done any exercise for the best part of 6 months. I've started last week going back, and I started with the routine I had when I first started, but I'm finding that it's not the right for me. You were saying about doing compound ones first, but when I'm doing the compound ones, I seem to be losing balance more. So yeah. Does that mean that really I should look at the whole workout?
Sure. So there can be exceptions to the rule, but it might be a case of kind of similar to what Kathy was saying, is doing some kind of movements to activate your muscles a little bit. So all of your kind of stabilizer muscles that help you balance, if those haven't been doing their job for a wee while, then it can be quite difficult to balance whenever we go into your kind of big compound movements. So I would be tempted, if I were you, to have like an appropriate warm-up setup. So we're activating everything. So you're doing the, specific to you, the things that you struggle with and the things that relate to the movement that you want to get better at. If that's like a sit to stand or a squat or something like this, you might want to look at kind of getting your glutes firing a little bit, getting your hips working. There could be a few things depending on what you struggle with to actually kind of activate. But I would probably still refer to this as a warm-up for you. But you may find, and again, this is not the only way to do it, this is just a good way to do it. So you may find that you're the exception to this rule, and that doing other movements first is going to be better for you. And so long as you can justify it, and this is one of the main things I want you to take away from these seminars as we go through, if you can justify it, then absolutely do it in your session. So if you can find a way to say kind of, this makes sense because X, Y, Z, and I'm going to monitor if it works in this way and that way, and I'll check back in, and then I'll either adopt it or discard it. If you're kind of making a thought process like this within your training, then it's absolutely encouraged and what you should be doing. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so we'll have a look at some examples, by the way, of what these sessions would look like. So the next thing I tend to think about is improve skill when necessary. So we can add some movements into your program to try to develop skill a little bit better. So if there is something that we're really struggling with, I like to do this usually second in my workouts. It depends how you do structure it, but I tend to do kind of skill movements second, because if you're focusing on trying to develop the skill of a movement, if there's something specific you struggle with, you probably want to be still quite switched on for it, not too fatigued, and you want to be able to kind of focus on what you're doing. So I tend to do skill movements second. Can anybody give me an example of what a kind of skill movement could be? So say if we were trying to improve our squats, for example.
Yeah, sorry.
Squat.
Say again for me. I think there's a couple of people.
Oh, sorry. So pause squat.
Yeah, absolutely. A pause squat could be a great way to work on the skill of the movement. Absolutely. Yeah. Good. What was the other answer there?
I was just going to say about sort of like really working on your depth, and like sort of thinking about hip placement, and just how far apart your legs are.
For sure, absolutely, yeah. So I think these are both good answers, and they're quite similar as well. So a pause squat could actually be a really good way of doing what you're suggesting there, Maureen. So these are some issues that you could definitely have with your squat. And if we do a pause squat, which is where you kind of squat down and you pause at the bottom and then stand back up again, anything that kind of breaks down the movement to an extent gives you the opportunity and gives you kind of extra time to work on the things that you struggle with. And the only way skill work is actually going to work for you and help you get better is if you figure out specifically what it is you struggle with and make sure that that movement that you're doing best fits that for you and best helps you do that. So as Maureen said, if you're struggling with depth, doing a pause squat could be really, really good, because you're actually spending time at the bottom. You're spending more time at the bottom of the squat. You're getting used to what that feels like. You're slowing it down. Whenever you go quite quickly, your muscles like to contract and tense up. It's called a kind of stretch reflex. So if we go slowly with less velocity, we don't get that as much. If we get the pause at the bottom, it can just allow you the opportunity to get used to that feeling and get your muscles firing in ranges of motion that they're not used to. So a pause squat could be really good and is really good for working on kind of depth and that kind of thing. So yeah, really good. Anything like that that breaks down the movement, that slows it down, and again, as we said, anything that you can justify, I'm doing this because it helps me with X, Y, or Z, and you have a way of measuring that, then you're good to go. So anything can be a skill movement if it helps you develop the skill of the movement. Great stuff. Okay, and then we look at kind of structural balance. So same, we've done let's have a look. So say we've done squats first, and then perhaps we've done some pause squats second. Are there any muscle groups that might not have had that much attention by this point? I say we're doing like a lower body session, so you've done your regular squats, you've maybe done some pause squats. What hasn't had that much attention in your lower body?
Hamstrings, calves.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, hamstrings, calves, two big ones. Yeah, for sure. So muscles on the back of your thigh, your hamstrings. These are the ones that kind of straighten up your hips, and also the ones that bend your knees. So these don't do a huge amount. They do a bit when you squat, but they don't do a huge amount. And especially depending on how you're built and how you squat, hamstrings aren't too active whenever you squat. And squatting wouldn't be a particularly kind of useful way of developing hamstrings specifically, even though they are active. squats won't develop your hamstrings massively. So yeah, hamstrings, we've not done too much of at this point, and then calves, absolutely. So 2 really good examples. So we want to think about structural balance. So if there's something missing from the session, if there's muscle groups that just haven't really been targeted, and it doesn't even have to be in the same session, you could say, right, I've not really done much hamstrings, so I'm going to need to either fit that into this session or into my next lower body session within the week. And this is where we can actually start thinking about the rest of the week and what we can put into the sessions for the rest of the week. So we're just trying to think about how to tick every box, basically. Does that kind of make sense?
Mhm.
Yep. And we tend to call these like accessory lifts. So these tend to be slightly lighter movements, and we can push your accessory movements a little bit closer to failure, right? So a little bit closer to complete muscular failure and complete fatigue. So accessory lifts tend to be lighter, and we can push them. I don't like the word harder, because I think I actually find doing, you know, a big hard set of squats, even if I maybe have 3 more reps left in the tank at the end of the set, I still find that significantly harder than taking my hamstrings to complete muscular failure, just because you get a burn with this, but it's not that complete systemic fatigue that you get from doing squats. So I don't like the word harder, but if we think about proximity to muscular failure, usually we can work your kind of accessory movements a little bit closer. Am I making sense? Are there any words or terminology, anything like that, that anybody would like me to confirm at all at this stage? Good stuff. Okay, and we also want to think about taking into account other planned sessions and activity, or perhaps taking into account some activity that you've done over the weekend. So if you've just been, for example, up one of the Munros on the weekend, you probably don't want to be doing your heavy leg session on the Monday, right? Because your legs will be a little bit fried by that point. So we want to take into account these other activities, and say you have, you know, a regular night where you go for a jog, or you play tennis or badminton or something like this. If you have some sort of reasonably strenuous activity on a specific night of the week every week, we probably want to take that into account, because, you know, we think about the main muscle groups you're using whenever you're doing that. We want to think about the things that fatigue, and we probably don't want to hit these muscle groups too hard, either right before or right after. We don't want to hit them hard before, because that's going to affect your performance and probably enjoyment of that activity. We don't want to hit them too hard afterwards, because they're already a bit fried and they need to actually recover in order to develop. So we need to think about these things as we go through. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And then we also want to think about other sessions that you've got. Okay, so if you're doing 2 lower body sessions within your week, so if you're doing one kind of, you know, squat focused lower body session, and then maybe one deadlift focused lower body session, would you say you would want to do them back to back, or a little bit spread out?
Spread out.
Spread out.
Spread out, absolutely, yeah. And why would that be?
Well, I learnt the hard way. So you're not as good on your second day when you're trying to do work the
Yeah.
same muscles.
Work the same muscles, absolutely, yeah. So whenever we're doing things like squats, we are using your quads, we are using your hamstrings, we are using your glutes, and then we're using a lot of core musculature to help kind of maintain that position. And then I could reel off that exact same thing for deadlifts as well. So we're still using hamstrings, glutes, quads, core. So we're using a lot of the same muscle groups, albeit in a slightly different way and different kind of loading pattern, but we are still using all of those same muscle groups. So if we're pushing ourselves quite hard and going quite heavy, we don't want to be doing that back to back, because we're probably not going to be getting that much out of our second session. So whatever that happens to be, say we do squats first and then we do heavy deadlifts the day afterwards, we're probably not going to be getting that much out of our heavy deadlift session, because we are a little bit fried from the squat session, and we want to prioritize the goal of the session, which is developing strength, performance, lifting nice and heavy, etc., etc. So we want to think about this as well. So all of these factors, if you take anything away from today, it's all of these kind of factors here. So you can take a little screenshot if you want, or a little picture on your phone. But if you're ever programming for yourself, just run through this little checklist. Okay, and you can just match up what you're doing to this checklist, and this should really kind of help. And it breaks it down, I think, reasonably simply. So there's only kind of 4 things that you have to think about. So if you do follow this, it should stand you in pretty good stead whenever you're setting up a program for yourself. Okay, do you want a wee bit longer on that slide, or shall I move on there?
happy to move on. That's
Yeah.
helpful. Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, so we've got an example week split for strength and hypertrophy here. So I'll chat you through that. So this is what we're saying. This is for strength and hypertrophy. If we were thinking about a runner, for example, they would think about the goal of their session. They probably want to do running first. Whereas if we're trying to develop muscle and strength, we want to do the movements that lend themselves better to that first. So again, this is just for strength and hypertrophy. So we could look at it like Monday, lower body session, and we do it with a squat focus. So we probably do our squat first, and then we tick off all of those other boxes that we've got in our kind of checklist from the previous slide there. And then Tuesday, we would want to think about maybe upper body. So we would do a bench press focus. So bench press, big, heavy compound movement, great for developing upper body pressing strength. You could also do something like push-ups, for example, but we would do a kind of big, heavy pressing movement, and then follow that up with all of the other stuff from that checklist. So our accessory training, any kind of skill work, if we need to do that. So that could be like a pause bench press, for example. And then we would look at probably taking a day off on Wednesday and recover a little bit. And then Thursday, we can do lower body again, but maybe this time with a bit of a deadlift focus. And then Friday, you can do upper body again, and maybe with a little bit of a military press, but kind of a shoulder press focus. So this is an example, and I want to emphasize that this is an example. This is not the only way to train. This is not the only way that works. This is just a way that works quite well, and this is for 4 days per week. You can structure a split for 2 days, for 3 days, whatever it happens to be. We follow the same concepts, but we just want to apply them to whatever kind of time budget we've got for the gym. Does this kind of make sense? Yep. Yeah. And can you see how, for example, bench press, so we're using, you know, shoulders, triceps, pecs, and we're using a lot of the similar muscles in military press. Can we see how these are a good 3 days apart? And then same with this. And then if you think about repeating it again, you've got your kind of Thursday as your previous lower body session, then you've got Friday, Saturday and Sunday for your lower body to recover before you come back to doing squats again on a Monday. So it gives you that opportunity to recover. Okay, cool. Yep. Oh, sorry. I've just got your first name as E there. E Boylan. What
Sorry,
was your name?
it's Emma. It is Tristan. Emma Birch. Sorry, the labelling is to do with work.
Oh, no worries.
I was just going to ask, what you're saying about that being a complete novice to this sort of style of training, are you saying that you would put those exercises with a bunch of other exercises, or is it just purely focusing on squats or, you know, whatever you've said in the list?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, absolutely. We would do them with a, oh, sorry, let me just try and go back to that. There you go. Yeah, so we would do them with a bunch of other exercises afterwards. So Monday might be your squat focus. So this would be your kind of strength development movement for that session. Yeah. But then we would want to think about maybe throwing in a skill movement. So maybe you do some kind of, you know, pause deadlifts or pause squats after that. And then you want to think about structural balance after that. So maybe we've not done too much hamstrings. We might throw in some hamstring curls after that. Et cetera, maybe some core work, that kind of idea, basically. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is basically we're going to look at upper and lower body, and we're just looking at the main kind of bread and butter of upper body and lower body training. So there's a bunch of kind of accessory movements that we can throw in on top of this, but these movements are the kind of basic fundamental movements, and this is like a movement category almost. So I'm just showing you an example in the video, but for example, vertical push is like a movement category, and horizontal push is a movement category, and we'll name a few exercises that might fit into that category as we go through. Okay, so vertical push, basically any push movement is where you're moving the weight away from you. Okay, so you can see when I'm demonstrating shoulder press here, how I'm moving that weight upwards away from me, right? And I'm kind of a push movement, you tend to be extending your elbows and flexing the shoulders. Okay, so this is your vertical push movement, and the reason it's called vertical, obviously gravity only works in one direction, so the weights will always be moving up in any movement, be it horizontal or vertical. The vertical in this case is relating basically to the position of my arms in relation to my torso. So you can see that they're kind of straight up here. Okay, if they were out this way to my torso, so for example, if I was doing a horizontal push, there'd be more kind of 90 degrees there, and then that's what we would call horizontal. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, so it's just looking at the angle of the movement. Okay, so that would be military press. Can anybody think of any other vertical push exercises?
Bench press.
Would that be vertical or
Sorry, I was not horizontal. I was on horizontal.
horizontal? Yeah, no, spot on. Yeah,
Yeah,
really good. But definitely a push exercise. Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
So vertical push, anything where you're kind of pushing weight up above your head would fit into this category. So any other examples of that in your programs that you can think of, anybody?
Chest press. I do an
Chest
incline
press.
chest press.
Okay, cool. So this would kind of be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, cool. So you could categorize that in this one or in this one, really, just because it's somewhere in the middle. And it's a really good point, actually, and a good example. So we tend to categorize, but as I always say to you, I don't want you taking protractors to the gym and worrying about the exact angle that you're pressing at, right? We just want to think roughly vertical push, roughly horizontal push. I would probably, in my own training and programming, I would tend to categorize your incline press into like a horizontal push category, just because it's using your pecs a little bit. And then I would put any kind of shoulder press into the vertical push variety. So anything like, anybody got like an Arnold press in their program?
I can't remember what that is.
So it's where you have dumbbells and you kind of bring them in and you press up around a bit of a circle like this. Yeah. So anything like this, or like a shoulder press movement with a dumbbell where you're pushing the dumbbells up above your head, or perhaps you do it on a machine. So you do a machine shoulder press, and you're kind of, the gyms will tend to have them, so they have the handles that you push up above your head. So
yeah, so I do a short. I've just started doing a Smith machine one. Actually, I'm a bit. I'm not keen on them, but I'm getting used to it. But on this one, I'd sort of, the first time I did it, I had to sit upright and I was struggling to twist. I'm crap with my hands, like twisting the things off and keeping, so I was clunking basically the hooks off the rack. But the last time I did it, and I think I sent you a video, I've actually reclined the seat and I'm much more comfortable in the reclined position. I felt like I could get my positioning right on the handles, and I had no weight on it. I've no idea what the weight is of these bars, but I'm going to add weight this week because I think having it in that incline, I don't know, it was just better for me than sitting bolt upright.
That's good stuff. Yeah, really good. Absolutely. No, that's good. Just whatever it is, just progress it week by week and keep tracking it. But yeah, no, really good. Great stuff. Okay, so we've got some horizontal push. So horizontal push, as you can see, is basically anything where you're kind of using your pecs a little bit as well. And you'll see that the arms are at about 90 degrees to the torso whenever we finish. So that would be kind of horizontal push. Can anybody name some horizontal push exercises? We've got dumbbell chest press going on here. Who said bench press before? Rhonda, was that you?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, so bench press, really good example. Anything else?
I've got it wrote. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I've got it wrote down, but I was thinking, is that right?
Push-ups is right, absolutely. Yeah, so push-ups I would call a horizontal push, 100%. So if we look at it, right, if you imagine if I kind of flipped over, I'm just going to pause it there. Okay, so if you imagine if my legs are straight and I flipped myself over, that would be in a push-up position, wouldn't I? And I'm still kind of pushing weight away from me. In this case, I'm pushing the floor away from me and I'm using myself as weight. But yeah, definitely, it's a push exercise, and I would put it in kind of horizontal category because it's using your pecs quite heavily. Yeah, really good. And then vertical pull, so that's just opposite to vertical push. So this is where we're kind of pulling weight toward us, or in this case, I'm pulling myself toward the bar. But it's basically anything where you're, again, finishing in that kind of 180 degree position here at the shoulder. And you're pulling the bar or pulling yourself or whatever it happens to be. You're moving an object closer to you. And this would be a pull exercise. So this would be an example of a vertical pull. Can anybody name any other vertical pulls for me that you might have in your program?
Lat pull down.
Yeah, lat
pull down would be the main one. Yeah, absolutely. And then you might have like a lock lat row or like a single arm lat row. So this is where you kind of leant forwards a little bit like this, and you're kind of pulling. Okay, but you'll see that your arm still kind of ends up in line with your torso when you finish. So it's quite a good one if you've just got resistance bands. But yeah, anything where we're kind of getting that like a pulling movement, but we're getting that pretty much kind of 180 degrees at the shoulder would be a vertical pull. And then horizontal pull. So we've got kind of seated, yeah, rowing, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So seated row variation here, any sort of row, as you say, yeah, absolutely would fit into the kind of horizontal pull category. So again, we're pulling weight toward us. So it could be a single arm dumbbell row, chest supported dumbbell row, could be an inverted row where you're kind of pulling yourself upwards. It could just be like I'm doing a cable row here. Anything pretty much with the word row in it would be your horizontal pull. Okay, so these are kind of the main bread and butter exercises of upper body training. Now, you don't have to do them all in the same session. For example, I like to do maybe 2 in 1. I just pick a push and a pull, and then I do the other 2 later on in my other upper body session in the week. If you only have 1 upper body session in the week, I'll probably try and do them all, and you won't have a huge amount of time for much else, but that's fine because this is, as I say, the kind of bread and butter of your upper body training. But I would try to get pretty much 1 variation of all of these in at some point during your week of training. So you can have a look through your programs and see what you've got in there, and you can message me and let me know which category the movements are in if you fancy. That can be quite a good exercise at kind of figuring out what you've got and relating it to this. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great stuff. Good. Okay, so this is your upper body bread and butter. So we always want to try and maintain, you know, some of this within your week at some point. Okay, so main lower body exercise types. So we've got a squat movement. So a squat movement annoyingly isn't everything with the word squat in it, because some squat movements fit more into this kind of category over here. So squat movement, I would say, is any squat movement where you've got both feet on the floor and they're kind of level with each other. You're not kind of striding one in front of the other. And we can think of probably quite a few variations. So I'm demonstrating a goblet squat there, but I'm sure you guys can give me some more variation.
Bulgarian squat.
Yeah, so I would say that would fit into this category here. So I'm doing Bulgarian split squat there in the kind of single leg. Yeah,
that's the small pictures.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. So I would say squat, anything where you've got your feet kind of level on a that kind of lateral plane, if that makes sense. So you don't have one in front of the other. So any kind of variation that you can think of.
Back squat.
Yep.
Front squat.
Front squat. Yeah, really good. Loads of things. These are the main ones. Absolutely. If you're feeling brave, you can look up a Zercher squat. This is what I did in lockdown, because you can load it up reasonably heavily. It's with a barbell. You don't have to lift it onto your back, because I didn't have a squat rack in lockdown, so I was Zercher squatting for the best part of a year. You basically hold the bar in like the crook of your elbows.
Just looked it up.
Yeah, it's not particularly comfy, but it did the trick. Yeah.
Did you not end up with a horrible bruising or burns or something on your elbows?
Yeah, they got a little bit bruised. They did get used to it. I use elbow sleeves anyway for a lot of my benching, so I kind of threw those on for Zercher squats. So my elbow sleeves took a bit of a beating, but saved my elbows a little bit. Yeah.
Every time I front squat, I get bruises on my arms. I look like I've been battered by the time I come home from the gym. And the back squat, I've given up on them because it was hurting me. I couldn't get the bar right, and I was ending up with a bad neck stroke back because I couldn't get the bar position properly. So I need to go back to that at some point when I'm.
This is absolutely something we can help with. If you want help with it, just send some videos across, and we'll definitely get on top of it. But yeah, it's. I always say to people, these types of movements, they never get particularly comfortable, but you just get used to them being uncomfortable. So we never want to expect kind of big, heavy barbell movements to feel particularly comfy, but you do 100% get used to them, and you don't really think about the discomfort of the positioning at some point. It's more just the exercise itself that will grab your focus. All right, so yeah, some really good examples there of some kind of squat variations. So this is kind of one of the main lower body movements that I would recommend having. So things like a sit to stand even, so kind of sitting into a chair and standing up out of it is a really good squat variation, and it's a good start point and a really kind of functional movement as well. And that can also be called like a box squat, for example. Okay, so we've got some hip hinge movements here. So I'm demonstrating what's called an RDL, a Romanian deadlift. So you can see I'm not flexing the knees too much, but I am flexing my hips quite a bit, and my back stays pretty much solid. So we're keeping it quite neutral and just trying to get most of that movement coming from the hips there. So this is a hip hinge movement. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yep. So this would be your deadlifts, your RDLs, single leg RDLs or single leg deadlifts, if anybody's got these, maybe split stance deadlift you might have seen, and basically anything where you're kind of picking something up from the floor and it being a reasonably kind of hip dominant movement. And then I always recommend adding in some kind of unilateral movements as well, because if you think about your day-to-day, a lot of the stuff that we do tends to be quite unilateral, and it's a great way to kind of build up the stability within your hips. So I do recommend doing lots of, or not necessarily lots, but just making sure that unilateral movement is a part of your program. So unilateral is just a fancy word for one-sided. So we've got a few different variations of a Bulgarian split squat there, but anything like a walking lunge, even just a split squat, so both feet on the floor, but in a kind of stride apart position like that, this would be kind of unilateral work. And then even things like kind of, you know, this is more like unilateral squat work, and then you can do unilateral deadlift work. So this would be like your single leg deadlift, for example. So lots of different variations of this that can kind of feed into both of these, but these are kind of the main heavy movements that you'll be doing. And then I think this is a great one to include at least once within your week's worth of training. I try and get something in maybe twice with unilateral work. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. All right, guys, smashing it, doing well today. So we've got an example here. Now, I don't want you to worry today about the sets, the reps, RAR, any of that kind of stuff. You absolutely feel free to ask about it, but we will be going through all of it in a good bit of detail in later sessions. So I don't want you to worry at all about any of that for now. We're just looking at the split, and this is just one session, which I've pulled out of a program for one of my lifters, and this just gives you an example basically of everything that we've just been talking about, how everything works together. So this is a lower body example, and this is a squat focused session. So it being a kind of squat focused session, we do the squat first while we're fresh, and then we move on to a pause deadlift. So that is your skill work. So this is movements where we're focusing on the skill of the movement. We're developing our ability to deadlift. And a pause deadlift can be really, really useful when it comes to control off of the floor, learning to take the slack out, learning to get into a good start position. So it's a really common exercise, and I use it with a lot of my lifters, much to their dismay. And then we've got some split squats, so unilateral work there as well. So this is kind of your hip hinge movement and skill work all in one, your pause deadlift, and then split squat, static lunge. This is unilateral stuff, as we've just talked about, and then just some accessories, so muscle groups that perhaps we've not been giving too much attention for the previous part of the session. So hamstrings, although they will be getting targeted a little bit in your pause deadlifts, we're focusing here more on efficiency of movement, and depending on the person and how they move, you might not get too much hamstring action. So hamstring drag curl is a nice way to add in some extra kind of hamstring work. So this could be just any sort of hamstring curl, or perhaps even RDL or something along those lines. And then plank bird dog. So this is, as I'm sure some of you will know, a lovely exercise for your core. So, yeah, so a little bit of core work there as well. So we haven't done a huge amount of core, although these exercises will be quite demanding on good core stability and strength. Just doing these exercises sometimes isn't quite adequate for some people in order to build that up. So plank bird dog can be a good addition to that. So you can see how we're kind of following all of those rules that we've chatted through, and applied it all into a session. So if we look at an upper body example, so upper body tends to go quicker, just because it doesn't take quite as long to recover. So I tend to put a little bit more in terms of exercises, and in terms of like total volume. So volume is kind of like sets times reps, so the total amount of work you've done basically. But we're still following the same principle. So bench press first. So this is like a bench focused upper body session. So bench press, your big heavy compound movement. So we're doing this first. And then what I like to do, so this is from, so I coach powerlifting, and in powerlifting, what we tend to do whenever we bench press is get into a really kind of arched position. We really kind of push the chest up. Okay, and this is great when it comes to lifting lots of heavy weight in a really safe and stable way. But it has the slight downside of not taking you through that much range of motion. And if we want to develop strength through range, and also just for general hypertrophy and muscle gain, we want to focus on range of motion as well. So I like to throw in bench press and a little bit of dumbbell press, because as you can imagine with a dumbbell, even if you do with your chest arched up, the dumbbells don't hit your chest on the way down, so they can come past it, so we can get a full range. So we're kind of ticking both boxes there. So we're getting much better at bench, we're getting strong because we can handle lots and lots of weight, but we're not neglecting that range of motion, so we're doing a bit of dumbbell press as well. Okay, and then lat pull down. So this would be kind of both examples of horizontal pressing, and then we've got lat pull down, so this would be kind of vertical pulling. So this is two of those kind of bread and butter movements that we chatted about before, and I would probably do the other two later on in that week. So that would be like a vertical push and a horizontal pull. So that could be a shoulder press and maybe a dumbbell row or something later on in the week. So we've done horizontal push and vertical pull here. And then the pump and fluff, as I like to call it, so all of your accessory works. Shoulder extensions, so this is just some kind of rear delt work, so work for that muscle in the back of the shoulder joint there. So we've not really targeted that much, maybe a little bit in your pull downs, definitely not in your bench press, but we've not targeted it too much at all, and it is an important muscle group. So shoulder extensions, and then I like to throw push-ups in as well, more for kind of tricep development, depending on who it is. So if somebody's reasonably strong on push-ups, we can actually use push-ups instead of a general strength development movement, more as a kind of accessory and hypertrophy movement. So this person was doing quite narrow grip and extending the elbows. So we would then have a little bit of guns as well. So guns is arm work. So we're looking at bicep curls and skull crushes. Some of you may have these in your program, where you bring the dumbbell down kind of behind your head whenever you're laying, and you extend like this. So although all of this does recruit a lot of these muscle groups within your arms, biceps and triceps, they probably aren't the first muscle group to fatigue. Usually it would be kind of your lats in a lat pull down, and the bench press is probably going to be your chest. Sometimes it is triceps, but chest and shoulders quite often in a bench press. So and your arms, because it's quite small muscle groups, they can handle lots and lots of work, so we can add in a little bit extra on top. So you can see how again we're kind of following all of those rules that we set out before, or I would say guidelines rather than rules, to quote Pirates of the Caribbean a little bit. But yeah, there we go.
Tristan, have you got an example of specific shoulder extension exercises? Like, I'm going a little bit blank, and I'm sure I have got them in my program. I'm just what particular
so
ones
this is actually this is an exercise that I specifically call shoulder extensions, but it's not that you don't tend to see it too often, but it's quite similar to, for example, like a rear delt fly.
All right, okay.
Or you might be doing a face pull. So that if you think about the category as opposed to the category being shoulder extension, think of the category being rear delt, so that wee muscle in the back of your shoulder, and then we can think about rear delt fly, face pulls. All of these types of movements would be targeting your rear delts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was thinking it was rear delt because I think I was supposed to do the reverse fly on the machine, but I always feel like I'm sat back to front on the machine, so I actually have to do it standing with dumbbells, because I kind of get right on the machine, if that makes any sense. I just feel like I'm back to front on it.
Yeah, and sometimes these machines just feel a bit awkward. The way they're set up, you know, they can't be set up in a way that works for everybody. We're all different shapes and sizes. So yeah, no, that makes sense. If you feel better with dumbbells, absolutely what you should do.
I wouldn't say that I'm doing them great, but I'm doing them, put it that way.
Good. No, I'm sure you're doing a good job, Deborah. But no, good stuff. All right, guys. I'll take a few questions now, but just before we do that, would anybody like to see any of those slides again? Do you want to take note on any of them, or a picture or anything like that? No. Good stuff. Okay. Yes, Rebecca. Sorry, Maureen, you pop your hand up first.
Yeah, what about the speed of doing the exercises? I think sometimes I'm aware that I maybe batter through them quite a lot, you know what I mean, to get them done. But is that right or is that wrong?
Could be right, it could be wrong. It depends on the sorry to be vague as always. You guys will be sick of me doing that. Oh, it depends, but unfortunately it does depend. So if you're maybe going through quite a high volume block, like hypertrophy block, we would probably look to do quite a short rest and do what you're doing and somewhat batter through them, as you say. Because this can kind of, we're trying to build up our work capacity, our ability to handle lots and lots of hard work, because this will come in handy when we go through heavier blocks later on down the line. So if you're working through quite a high volume program, that would probably make sense to do. But then if you're maybe doing lots of heavy work, and we will chat a little bit more about different blocks, different types of programs and that kind of thing later on. But if you are working through lots of heavy work, you probably want to take your time a little bit more and make sure that you're moving safely and efficiently, and that your lungs are not preventing you from utilizing good, efficient technique when lifting heavy weights. So it depends basically on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does actually, because I can think about the difference from moving from like a previous program to the one I'm on now.
Sure, yeah.
And I've had to slow down, I think, just because it's the big compound movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. No, I take, for example, in my programs, I take anywhere between maybe like 45-second rest up to maybe a 5-minute rest between sets. But I wouldn't say that a 5-minute rest would be necessary for any of you at this stage if you're just kind of starting out, or maybe in the first kind of year of your training, because you probably won't be lifting weights that are kind of recruiting that much of you for that to be a necessary thing for you to recover for the kind of following set, if that makes sense. But as you do start to get much stronger, the downside of that is whenever you do your set, even if it's the same proximity to failure, whenever you learn to use you know, more muscle groups, more motor units, all the rest of it, you get much more systemic fatigue that comes with that. So as an example, world's strongest man, Hafthor Bjornsson, has a kind of deload, so a slightly easier week every second week, whereas I would say for a beginner you could probably train for up to 6 months. I've even had people train for a year without having to take like a week off or an easy week or anything like that. So you can see the difference with when you get stronger, you need to factor that in a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's really handy, thanks.
No worries. Rebecca.
You know, getting stronger and stronger, at some point we're going to get to the position where we've achieved what we want to achieve. When you get there, I mean, you can't keep pushing and pushing and pushing. What do? Do you then just sort of stick at the level you're at? Do your muscles get used to that and then sort of regress?
I'll let you know when I get there, but so far I've never been quite satisfied. Yeah, it's really up to you. So I think if you have this really set goal in your head, if you have something that you're specifically trying to kind of aim for, and then you hit it and you think, okay, that's me done, you can somewhat maintain that by doing similar intensities and similar programming to you were around the time when you hit that goal, and this will help you maintain it. But for me, I always like to push for either a little bit more, or if I'm trying a new movement or something like this, it just it gives you that opportunity for more PBs, because it's a movement that you've not done before and something you're kind of getting used to. So I always like to have something that I'm aiming for and some way of measuring progress within training. And I've so far not coached anybody of any age who has said, that's me, I'm happy with that, see you later. Like, generally speaking, people like to keep pushing. It's kind of human nature, and especially you're all here, you'll all be kind of striving for self-improvement in one way or another. So even though certain aspects of your training or lifestyle, whatever it happens to be, might go on the back burner at certain stages, you'll probably be pushing one area of your training or whatever it happens to be at every point, if that makes sense. So quite vague again, but yeah, I haven't found anybody who said that's me. I'm done.
I think you might have done now.
Yeah. Okay. No worries.
I've got no desire to be a power lifter. I don't want to lift huge
That's
weights.
fine. Yeah, no, that's fair. You don't have to be a power. I coach loads of people who don't want to be powerlifters. That doesn't mean that the power lift can't be really useful to helping you achieve some other goals. So if you can't think of any performance related goals that you have at all, I would recommend kind of sitting down and putting some real kind of thought into it, because if we do have these performance related goals, it means that the physiological benefits of doing all of the exercises that help you hit these goals just kind of happens as like a byproduct of you enjoying the process and trying to get better at some sort of physical performance. It doesn't have to be, absolutely doesn't have to be powerlifting at all, but things like squats, bench, deadlift, all of these types of movements, as we've just discussed, are quite good fundamental movements that lend themselves quite well to developing overall strength. So yeah, I would definitely try to focus on some sort of goal, some physical performance sort of goal, and then all of the training you do for that will have the byproduct of helping you gain more muscle, speed up your metabolism, keep you nice and lean, etc., etc. So all of these good things come with it, but they happen as a byproduct instead of you just focusing on that and thinking about having to tick this unpleasant box of training in order to hit that. You'll actually start enjoying it a little bit more.
There are also different types of training. You'll probably come across that with your coach, Rebecca. I mean, I've started doing barbell complexes, which are a slightly different, as well as my hypertrophy training, and they're just a slightly different focus that Fra chucked them in. So basically I have to do 5 sets of 10 different exercises, no, 5 exercises 10 times before I have a rest. So 50 minutes and then have a rest. So completely different focus. And obviously I'm not lifting big weights. And, you know, so that's a sort of a change. Now, Rebecca, you're a rower, aren't you?
Yeah.
So there's lots of stuff there just to improve your rowing speeds, that you're not going to be lifting big weights, but you're going to gain muscle control, muscle skill, and just get your muscles working more effectively together, which will improve your rowing.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of things I can think of that I could do, but just to keep religiously plugging away, just chucking more and more weight on a bar for deadlifting, it just doesn't excite me in the same way.
So they'll be able to give you a different program, perhaps. I mean, I had one which was like a HIIT workout. I had to stop it because I've just not got the coordination to do kettlebells and jump at the same time. I was going to kill myself or someone else. That was me. And those were just things Fra keeps throwing at me as different, different things to try, as alongside the normal sort of structured hypertrophy work. So there's lots of different things, different types of workouts.
Yeah. Well, I finished with Fra, but I've just joined a new gym, and there's small group PT sessions, and they're fantastic. Yeah. But obviously the emphasis is slightly different. Yeah. I'm just
a lot of people do cross training, which is really, I find really hard, but it's a different focus now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tristan, taking over your.
No, really good points, Kathy. Yeah, no, really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just have a think. There's a lot out there. There's a lot to enjoy. So have a think about it, and also watch what you do whenever you deadlift, and watch what you do whenever you row, and you'll probably find a lot of similarities. So see you improving as at your deadlift as probably a direct correlation to you improving your ability to row.
Yeah.
Really useful movement for sure. But no, hopefully that's helpful, and thank you very much, Kathy, for input there. Okay, we'll go for 3 more questions, guys, and then we'll wrap up for today. Dawn, go for it.
I have noticed that now that I'm back doing some resistance work, the bench presses, shoulder press, my left wrist is like a broken wrist. whereas my right hand's straight. Do I have to try and sort that out, or can I continue like that?
I would just get an appointment. Are you getting symptoms with it? Are you getting pain?
No
and
symptoms
discomfort?
at
No.
all. It's just I'm aware that I'm holding, you know, my left hand sort of like that, but my right hand's like that when I'm pushing up.
For sure. I mean, none of us are
Okay.
symmetrical, so we will have you know, certain kind of abnormalities and different bone structures on different sides and all the rest of it. None of us will be symmetrical. No one will have their right arm exactly as strong as their left arm and moving in exactly the same way. It can start to become an issue, these things, if we have serious kind of imbalance or kind of, you know, different unbalanced movements as we're training. It can potentially become an issue. And it's essentially because you can overload certain tissues significantly more if the bar is tipped to one side or something like that. So long as we employ appropriate load management and we take into account the fact that it might be slightly off balance, there's nothing to stop you from developing your strength and function. It's encouraged for you to develop your strength and function, even if there is a bit of an asymmetry. And your body will adapt. Bodies are very, very adaptable to these sorts of things. We just need to make sure that you are very aware of it already, which is great. You just need to make sure that you monitor it. And if you do start to feel any sort of a niggle, I would definitely chat with a physio, chat with your coach, and just make sure that you're programming it around it. Don't train through pain if you start to feel niggles that you think are associated with it, or any other sort of niggle. Deload, let it calm down, and then move back into it.
Yeah.
You know, the following week, for example, we just need to be really, really careful with these things. But no, everybody is asymmetrical. So in theory, you're absolutely grand to keep going, but just keep an eye on symptoms, basically, in case they crop up.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries at all. Deborah. Oh, you're on mute there, Deborah.
There we go. I've a lot of it didn't make sense to me. I've only joined Elite last week, and I'm waiting for the program from you.
No worries. So the program will come from your coach as opposed to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So from Gemma. I haven't got it yet.
Yeah. Do you have a program that you were working through?
Yeah, but I'm mainly at home with resistance bands. But I did message Gemma to say I'm going to get some dumbbells, and she's recommended some. So I'm hoping that the program will come through soon. I'm not doing gym at the moment. I'm not going to the gym at the moment.
That's absolutely fine.
But that's something for the future.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, that's absolutely fine. So basically, I would keep doing exactly what you were doing and tracking progress. And then whenever your coach kind of feels it's appropriate to have updates and programs and all the rest of it, they should send it through. But if you feel it should have been sent and it's not arrived, then just give her a wee nudge. And I'm sure it'll come through. Sometimes we send things, and if the Wi-Fi connection is a little bit dodgy, it looks like it's sent, but it actually doesn't send until we refresh it and that kind of thing. It's just the system. So just give her a wee nudge and she'll double check it for you. But I'm sure it'll come through soon.
Thank you.
No worries. And also don't worry about anything being like sounding quite complex. The first times you go through all of these new concepts, it's gonna be complex. So we just pick it up bit by bit. We'll go through them multiple times, and remember, it's all recorded. And you can also just message me on Telegram and ask anything that you're unsure of.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, Danny.
Yeah, I just signed up as Elite Physique. So now I want to change from losing weight to changing my physique, toning it up more. Obviously, I've had 6 months break, and I did message you, but I haven't heard anything back. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to send you anything? If so, do I send it just once a week, or?
Yeah, so I do the same as when you're kind of previously in Elite. So if you send through kind of any videos or anything like that before the end of the day on a Thursday, so that'll be before the end of the day today, for example, then that will guarantee that I'll be able to get back to you before the following week. So last week I did all responses on a Friday morning. So if it came through after that, I may have missed it, but I'll see it.
No, I haven't sent anything yet, because I've lost my sound on my computer, and I'm having to do everything through my phone, which
Gotcha.
is quite difficult because it's very difficult to record on my phone. I haven't fathomed out a way of doing it yet. I know you can balance it, but as soon as I touch it, the phone falls down. So I'm not having much success with that at the moment.
I will send you, see if you remind me, I'll send you a little Loom video that I've made, which kind of shows you how to set up your phone. All you need is a water bottle. But I'll
use a
show you.
trainer. Use a trainer.
Trainer works pretty well.
I've got my phone in the heel of my trainer and just line it up, and then just press, and then you can edit. You just tap the edit button when you open up the video, and you can just shorten it, so your coach doesn't have to see your backside walking towards your piece of equipment.
Because I found out how to do it on my computer, but of course now my computer's not good, so I'm having to do everything on my phone, which is not ideal.
I'm sorry to hear that. No, I'll send that video across to you, Danny. That's no problem at all.
Brilliant.
But yeah, just chat with your coach. They will sort you out with an appropriate program, and then I'll do exactly the same as we've done in Elite. So just responses to videos or any questions that you've got. So I'm always online either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So we just say to guarantee that I'll see it before the next week, just definitely send it through before the end of the day on Thursday. Questions or videos or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I've got a phone call with David tomorrow, so
brilliant.
Hopefully I'll know where everything is going.
Great stuff. Good. Fantastic. All right, guys, let's wrap up there, but everything is recorded, so if you want to watch anything back, then please do. And I wish you a lovely rest of your evening, and we'll see you next Thursday. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.